Hey, welcome back to another episode of Regenerative Farming News with me, Heather Heinrichs, a former journalist turned farmer turned passionate advocate for regenerative farming. In this week's episode, I'll be talking about the Open Farm Days being held in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Spearheaded by provincial governments, these annual events are an exciting movement connecting consumers with the farms that grow their food. And for the interview segment this week, I had a fantastic chat with Chris Beaudry of CRB Farms and learned about his unique way of using regenerative principles on his family farm. And as always, if you enjoy this podcast, please tap that follow button and share the podcast on your social media. The more folks who learn about regenerative farming, the bigger impact we can make together in transforming our food systems. You can also swing by my Facebook page or Instagram to join the conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts, answer your questions, and find out what topics you want to explore. Let's dive in. In farming news this week, we have a big exciting event happening here in Saskatchewan and later this month in Alberta as well. It's the annual Open Farm Days. In Saskatchewan, the event is running this weekend as I'm recording this episode, August 9th and 10th. Organized by Farm and Food Care Saskatchewan, this year's event has 35 host farms and agri-food venues participating. The 2024 weekend welcomed nearly 3,000 visitors to a diverse mix of operations, grain fields, dairies, greenhouses, distilleries, and ranches, offering interactive tours, food samples, and authentic farm storytelling. Impressive engagement shows 94% of attendees rated their experience good to excellent, and 90% left with a deeper appreciation for the care and innovation behind food production. If you want to check out the Alberta Open Farm Days, they are still coming up on August 16th and 17th, with over 150 farms opening up their gates to the public. This year's theme for Alberta is Water, the Lifeblood of the Farm, highlighting the critical role of water stewardship across farm types. These Open Farm Days are not strictly regenerative based, but they are a great opportunity for farmers to connect with consumers. For any farmer who is looking to grow a local customer base, this is a great tool to get free advertising and make some extra cash. Since its inception in Alberta in 2013, the event has welcomed over 235,000 visitors to more than 1,200 farms, generating $1.7 million in on-farm sales, with 2024 alone bringing in over $300,000. These Open Farm Days don't just offer a day out, they're building bridges between consumers and producers, encouraging questions, learning, and a real understanding of where our food comes from. It's an invitation to reconnect, respect, and renew trust in farming, live and in person. If you're a consumer, this is a great opportunity to get connected with a local farm. And in other news, a farm equipment company called Horsch has unveiled its newest disc drill, which is comparable in size to mainstream tillage type of seeders, which use shanks to move the soil and plant the seed. This is a great announcement to see in regards to regenerative farming. There is not a ton of options on the market for disc drill types of seeders, whereas there are many companies making a lot of shank type seeders. Having a company recognize the need for more options in the disc drills shows that more farmers are buying no-till drills. The shank or shovel type of seeders work by moving the top layer of soil to plant the seeds, whereas the disc type of seeders only cut a thin line into the soil without moving it, just big enough to plant the seed, and then packs the soil back down to cover it. When you look at a field seeded with a shank drill, you'll see the soil is highly disturbed and moved around. When you look at a field seeded with a disc drill, the disturbance is so minimal it can be hard to tell the field has been seeded. This is a great way to conserve the water in the soil in springtime. Instead of turning the soil over and exposing all of that moisture to the air for it to evaporate, farmers who use disc drills keep that water in the dirt for a better germination rate. And for my last news article today, I wanted to share an older bit of news I found on the Canadian Cattlemen's website from 2022. This is one of the most inspiring stories I've uncovered, and it comes from Calvin and Marla Gavlin, a third-generation cattle operation just outside McCord, Saskatchewan. They've shifted toward regenerative practices, focusing on cover cropping and grazing, and the changes have been both profound and personal. I'm looking forward to interviewing the Gavlins for an upcoming episode, but in the meantime, here's their story as told in this 2022 article. Written by Melissa Jeffers Bazan. She says that Calvin shared in 2019 that he nearly lost hope when hail wiped out their first cover-cropped field entirely. But that field bounced back quickly, and it stood through the winter. That year, Calvin said, quote, "For the first time in my life, I never started a tractor for the majority of the winter." Quote. He says the cows grazed happily, content, and in great shape, without the usual feed runs and equipment wear and tear. That kind of downtime transformed his winter and their lives. Not spending hours feeding every day meant Calvin had more time with his family during those long dark months. More peace, less stress. Studies show agriculture has some of the highest rates of stress, depression, and anxiety. In Saskatchewan, 53% of producers fit the criteria for depression, and 71% for anxiety, largely because conventional farming often offers no break, and the high cost of inputs creates large looming debts that can cause severe stress. Inputs create a vicious cycle of spending debt on inputs and then hoping you get enough rain for a crop big enough to pay off the debt and make a decent living. Never mind fluctuating crop prices and the challenge of harvesting the crop on top of that. There's a lot of stress in the world of farming. But regenerative land systems are changing that. When farming practices work with nature, building the soil health, reducing inputs, restoring balance, farmers can gain more time outside of the tractor and use less inputs, reducing the debt load. That gives them space to breathe, reflect, and reconnect with their families. The land improves, and so does the farmer. Bexon's article goes on to say that Gavlin says, quote, "What we're finding with our cover crops, the ones that we grazed last year, there was also a soil health benefit that I never expected." Quote. Gavlin says, quote, "And when we did our fertility test last fall, when I hired Nutrien to do it, they were very skeptical of that. But when the results came back in that field, the cover crop that we grazed in October is actually showing 30 pounds more, and the biological activity of the soil is higher, and the CO2 levels are higher. That cover crop is doing more than just feeding my cows. The soil is improving." End quote. Also, because of all the different nutrients offered in his diverse cover crops, he has seen an improvement in his cattle herd. Quote, "When we preg checked in September, the vet was just over the moon excited about our conception rates, because none of our neighbors or anybody even in the country was even close to it. And she said," he's quoting the vet, "What are you doing differently?" And Gavlin said, "Well, they were grazing cover crops." Gavlin says they were also putting on more weight on the cover crops than they had on normal vegetation. Not only that, but the cover crops persisted through the brutal drought of 2021. Quote, "And then when we had some August rains, it just flourished. And that 80-acre field produced enough feed for 5.5 weeks for my 200-head operation. They started grazing October 1st, and the economics of it and the drought, that field paid for itself many times over. Even last year's drought, taking the risk has proven itself that it was very rewarding," Gavlin says. "Because when all of my monocultures were dead, my cover crop flourished. So when people come and see that, they can relate and take it back to their operations. And then they can take the chance on whether it's 5 acres or 10 acres, or whatever they're willing to trust or even commit to. It gives them the opportunity to look at it." So, even though that's old news from 2022, It's exciting to see that farmers have already been seeing success with this in the recent past in recent droughts. And it just goes to show that this isn't some new and unproven method that somebody's asking you to test on your farm. It's already happening and it's already successful. And that's also everything I have for the news this week. Let's get into our interview. I am thrilled to share my interview with Chris Beaudry of CRB Farms, located near Rose Valley, Saskatchewan. Chris and his family have been passionate pioneers of cover cropping, starting with just 10 acres back in 2016. Their journey hasn't been without challenges, including 3 difficult years that coincided with a devastating tragedy for the local hockey community. Chris was coaching with the Humboldt Broncos when their bus was struck by a semi-truck, resulting in the heartbreaking loss of 16 lives and injuring 13 others. Despite this profound loss, both Chris and the community found the strength to heal, and Chris remained committed to his cover cropping work. He believed in the potential of regenerative practices and persevered until he cracked the code. And today, his success stands as a testament to resilience, innovation, and hope.
Yeah, my name's Chris Beaudry. I'm a 4th-generation farmer near St. Front, Saskatchewan. And for those that aren't up to date on towns with 10 or 11 people, that's about an hour southeast of Melfort, Saskatchewan, and pretty much an hour east of Humboldt. You go slightly north for a little bit. And I have actually multiple other roles. I've been selling seed for Pioneer for 12 years.
Wow.
And I've been selling cover crops for Imperial now. I believe this is my 5th year. And I used to be a former junior hockey coach. I was one of the coaches with the 2017-18 Humboldt Broncos. And I'm also currently an MLA in the Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly.
Wow. You have been busy.
Yeah, it is busy.
Yeah, that's really impressive. That's quite a resume. I have to say that's some really interesting work that you've been doing over the years. So yeah, you're from a pretty small area then. If anybody knows about the middle of nowhere and very small towns, that's definitely your location by the sounds of it. But you have been able to make some really big changes on your farm. I found you actually through the Regeneration Canada website, and they did have some information there on what you grow and your crops and stuff. And I found it interesting. I just wanted to tell you about one little thing I found on there that really piqued my interest about your farm. So it says your products are like wheat, barley, peas, and mustard, and your regenerative practices are reduced tillage, no-till, soil cover, biodiversity. And then right down at the bottom, it has a little section that says observations. And there's only one sentence there, and it says, the soil is alive again. And I just wondered if you could talk about that.
Yeah. I would say well over a decade ago, I started noticing whenever we would rent new land, I mean, just the simple things, your soil test, just simple NPK, organic matter, and pH test, I could see, wow, there's sure a difference here with what we're doing. I don't know what we're doing. Well, I mean, I had an idea back then, but like, we're doing something that is sure helping the organic matter on some of these soils. Yeah. And our phos levels. We've always been guys that have kept phos levels quite high. And it would have been, 10, 11 years ago, I started saying, there's got to be something a little more here. We had grown a lot of clover back in the 90s and early 2000s, and I said, we got to figure out something. We got to find a way to make these soils even better. And I was lucky enough I've had a friend who was really interested in carbon, and he was working with Earth Smart at the time, and he kept sending me podcasts. And it would talk about soil becoming alive. And I started to look at some of the fields that we would go and disc, some of these areas that along a slough that every fall Dad would be like, oh, I'll get it fixed up this year. And we'd disc it and cultivate it and spray it. And now all of a sudden, you know what's back? The kochia's back the next year. Soil's gray. The sun's cooking it. And it didn't take long after my first year of planting a cover crop blend where year before barley would only grow barely ankle high. And then the sunflowers and the sweet clover and the tillage radish and the saltlander grass were between 4 and 7 feet tall. It's like, okay, there's life here again.
Wow.
Something's happening.
Yeah, you're not kidding. So how did you start these principles? You said you kind of had been using them, but you were just starting to notice, you're like, hey, something's happening here. Let's pinpoint what exactly is going on. How did that all come to be? Like, your dad had some principles that you started to notice. How did that all start for your experience?
I mean, we knew you see the legume, you get more nitrogen in the soil. We knew that when we had clover, that for 2 to 3 years after, crops just grew better, and it wasn't just the nitrogen. But to eliminate a clover or an alfalfa crop in the late 90s and early 2000s, we would eliminate it by disking it up 4 or 5 times. And my friend that had been sending me videos, and we had been using Earth Smart products. We've been getting away from insecticide seed treatments. We've been getting away from a little bit of fungicides. I could just tell there was this point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired during spraying season. I'm like, there's got to be something different. And I would ask guys, and they're like, oh, that's just what it is. You're just supposed to be sick. I'm like, what? That doesn't seem correct. You're just not supposed to feel good. Like, what are we doing to our food if it's making me sick?
Yeah.
And so then there's got to be more here. I want to learn more. And in 2016, I told my dad, let me play with 10 acres. And I seeded a sweet clover crop that I wanted to plow down. I still hadn't figured out that I shouldn't be tilling all the clover down, but I wanted to take this 10 acres, do soil samples in the fall, the spring, the fall again in the following spring. Partway through the year, my dad's like, oh, this looks too good. We got to combine it. I'm like, it's 10 acres of sweet clover. It barely yields much. He's like, no, we're combining it. I'm like, oh, okay. So my first year trial, I got the All Father, which is the name my sister and myself, we joke about my dad. He changed the plans. But I convinced him, though, let's not disc this.
Yeah.
And then my spring versus spring and fall versus fall soil samples shocked us that not only the organic matter didn't change much. Of course, we knew the nitrogen would, but there were some other changes in the spring that we really noticed, and that was the amount of water in the 0 to 6 zone and the 6 to 12 and the 12 to 24 zone. That was the biggest one. Like, okay, now we're on to something. And so that was the beginning of our journey.
So it was that water infiltration that really was the light bulb moment for you.
Absolutely. And it started a path that went a lot quicker than we expected. The next year, I wanted to try something else again. So we weren't sure what we were going to do. And I said, well, let's just try that 10 acres again. Let me play with it. And I just wanted not an organic spot, but I didn't want to spray herbicide on a blend I grew for my chickens.
Mhm.
So I did 10 acres of peas, wheat, oats, and I underseeded it to red clover again. So I went from sweet clover to red clover. And I was just playing around, not really sure what I was fully doing.
Mhm.
And we ended up, actually, that was the year I was coaching in Humboldt, and the bus crash happened,
Oof.
and I had lost 16 of my players and staff. And so that seeding, I was pretty much lost, and I said, I don't care what we do, just plant something, whatever. We'll put this mix in. By
Mhm.
the end of the year, I could really see. Oh, this may sound a little hippie-ish, but I could really see the interdependent nature, the interdependent relationship
Mm.
between the soil, the food, myself, the water, that you remove one thing and all of it falls apart. Like, we remove carbon,
Mhm.
we're not here. Nothing's here. We remove, I mean, we can go down the list of essential elements. I mean, look at the periodic table. We remove one of them, and life itself is not here.
Mhm.
And that really spurred my interest in this. And that's when I started studying Joel Salatin's, Elaine Ingham, and I mean, the list goes on and on. Gabe
Mm.
Brown.
Yeah.
And the next year I said, okay, I'm doing more of this. And I got Dad convinced. He let me do 2 fields. I had 60 acres in my 10 acres, and well, off we went.
Okay. And how did 2018 go for you? What did you seed on all of that, and how did it end up?
2018, 2019, 2020, I'm being fully candid, didn't work worth a shit.
Oh.
It was not good at all. And you know why? And that changed how I started to look at everything. And is because a lot of these practices were not meant for my area.
Mm. Oh.
Some, on some level, they were, but I actually, by this point, I was public speaking on mental health and trauma and addictions.
Mhm.
And I was doing a talk when COVID first opened up again in Alberta on the Thanks for Farming tour that was brought to you by Thunderstruck Ag Equipment. And I heard a guy named Avery Shepherd speak, who was an agronomist and sales guy for Imperial Seed. And the way he talked about cover crops, it was so much more Western Canadian.
Oh,
Like,
interesting.
he started talking about clovers and plantain, putting them with your canola, and talked about different grasses and blends you could put with your cereals. And I'm like, these grow here. This works here.
Mhm.
And so after speaking with him, he ended up saying, well, you try some of this stuff, but you should sell for us too. And I said, well, we'll wait and see. And my first year, there were things, and that's when I seeded that sunflower and saltlander hay mix and tillage radish blend that took that soil that was dead, and I could see the transformation into life. And I'm like, yeah, the soil's alive again.
Mm.
We found what's supposed to grow there. So in 20 and 21, I tried all the practices that Avery and that Kevin Elmy had suggested. And some of them worked, but there was still a fine tuning that was needed. And that's what I've done the last 3 years, because I can go and seed a 12 species cover crop blend,
Mhm.
and we can throw a hula hoop around. And wherever it lands, three things might grow there. And you throw it another, 100 feet or as far as you can throw it, and there's 5 different things growing over there. And we throw it again, and there's 3 other different species growing in that area. And that started to change my mind. I'm not dealing with fields anymore.
Oh.
And we're dealing with all the multitude of different soil types.
Mhm.
And they started to look in these massive blends and be like, what are the main things that work here?
Mhm.
I've seen, okay, plantain. It survives in almost all our soil types. Red clover, certain brand of alfalfa, fall rye. Italian ryegrass is great, worked well for us, only works in about 70% of our soils where it germs consistently. I wanted some consistency to what I was doing
Mhm.
so that one, like I said, I was selling canola for a decade.
Yeah.
And I've got guys that come to my farm. We do 30, 40 trials a year. I wanted to introduce this stuff. But as soon as I was telling them extra pass, more work,
Mm.
more fuel, they're like, get the heck out of here.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be able to have a system to say, here you go. You don't have to do anything extra. You're already harrowing, turn your Valmar on. Put a
Mhm.
pound of red clover and a pound of alfalfa and a pound of plantain down.
Yeah.
Yeah, you seed your Clearfield canola over it, nothing changes. Oh, you're seeding Italian or Liberty canola. You can put a meadow fescue, perennial ryegrass, an Italian ryegrass. You just spray your Liberty a little higher rate, and you can remove your clethodim. Nothing changes. No extra passes. Oh, your cereals. I've got you covered. Take your grain cart in February or March. Layer your oats with fall rye. Weigh it out at about 25 pounds an acre of fall rye. You're going to have an allelopathic zone there. You're going to have a living root there. You're going to have water infiltration. Oh, you've got kochia issues and wild oat issues. The best thing that fall rye does with its allelopathic zone is it controls those two things.
Mm. So you're telling farmers to plant crops with their cash crop. Am I understanding that right?
100%.
And are they doing it?
I have a couple guys who are. I'm on year 3 now of where I've kind of found what I think works in this area, or that not that works. What every farmer, what they do works for them, and I'm not telling anybody that I know what works for them at all.
No.
What I'm saying is I've really looked into what works for me
Mhm.
and tried to find some consistency in some of these cover crops for this area and find the things that benefit the soil in the St. Front, Rose Valley, Nacum area.
Mhm.
And some of the systems that I'm doing seem to be doing that. If you'd like to try them, I'm open to share.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those years when it didn't work, what do, what would you say in detail that was not working there? Like you were trying to grow plants that just weren't good for the area. Am I understanding that right?
Well, that or methods. We didn't, if I wanted to seed an Italian ryegrass cover crop with my oats,
Mhm.
I didn't want to seed it twice because Italian ryegrass, of course, can't be seeded at the depth that oats is. I
Right.
didn't want to take up an entire tank on my drill
Mhm.
because then you're losing a lot of efficiency.
Mhm.
So I'm like, we'll Valmar it down.
Mhm.
Well, that just didn't give enough soil coverage for the Italian ryegrass. On one year we tried it. The next year we didn't get enough spring rain. So what ended up happening was the following spring, after a big snowpack, and you harrow again in the fall, and you get the chaff from your oat harvest.
Mhm.
The following spring, the Italian ryegrass grew like mad, but we weren't wanting that as our cover crop then because we were planting something else.
Right.
And there was, multiple things like this. We tried. I grow a lot of perennial ryegrass and meadow fescue now.
Mhm.
And so it'll be a cover crop with my Liberty canola, but the next year it'll be its own actual crop.
Ah.
And things like the fescue that you can leave for up to 5 years, I just finished my second Yeah, second harvest on one fescue field, and I was very surprised with 3.5 inches of rain. It's probably going to be our highest netting and grossing crop this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's impressive.
yeah. And not only that, I have it on 60 acres that is, there's 40 really good acres. There's 10 acres, and there's 10 acres that was nothing but weeds, kochia, really alkaline soil.
Hmm.
It isn't that anymore after 2 years.
Wow. Wow. You've learned how to use your time better and just be able to put in crops that terminate at the right time, or you can put in at the same time as when you're making other passes with your equipment, like you said with your Valmar spreader, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? It also wasn't economical either.
Mm-hmm.
That to try some of the blends I had, they were 40, 50, $60 an acre.
Mm, that's a lot.
And yeah, and not to say that all of them were. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Italian ryegrass is a very cheap option.
Mm-hmm.
Using a fall rye blended with the cereal, very cheap option. But some of the things I was trying weren't economical. And yes, there's some great programs through the Watershed Authority, through PepsiCo. There's a few others out there that help with this. And without them, I probably would have abandoned all hope at some point because it just wouldn't have been economically feasible.
Mm-hmm.
But now that it is, I'm seeing, I mean, I had a canola field that was underseeded to a clover alfalfa blend, and the next year, on average, I had 32 pounds more of nitrogen.
Wow. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like canola uses a lot of nitrogen, doesn't it?
Yeah, now this was also during my learning time, and I had seeded too heavy.
Oh, okay.
I had seeded about 2.5 to 3 pounds of each, where I'm down to a pound of each now.
Oh, okay.
So in the fall, I had to swap that whole field. We couldn't straight cut it because the clover and alfalfa were they were heavy, heavy, heavy.
Yeah, so you had to swath. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now, when I'm down to a pound of each, they stay something that resembles more cover crop and isn't trying to overpopulate itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually got right now. We just got 3 inches of rain, and once the ground dries, I'm going to be swathing my fall rye and winter wheat, because where I had this 1 pound of clover and 1 pound of alfalfa last year, I seeded fall rye and winter wheat into it in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And this spring, I went and sprayed a broadleaf at a rate not to kill the clover and alfalfa, but just to set it back. It didn't start growing again until about the 20th of June,
Mm-hmm.
18th of June,
Mm-hmm.
where the fall rye and winter wheat were headed by then. Its yield was set. I now have clover and alfalfa that are about a foot and a half shorter than the fall rye and the winter wheat. And I'm hoping to get somebody to swath graze it after I combine.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, all that organic matter is going back in the soil. And I've had clover and alfalfa on year 2, which is a higher producing nitrogen year than year 1,
Mm-hmm.
growing all year. And it will grow until next spring till I terminate it.
Wow.
So that'll be over 2 years with one cover crop.
So you've really taken the regenerative principles of a living root in the soil for as much of the year as possible, and you've really nailed that down. It sounds like you have living roots almost all year.
Yeah, and because we are getting into a drier trend here, so the water infiltration is extremely important to me. And some of these practices, this isn't on every field. I wish it was,
Mm-hmm.
But not every field we have is fit for clearfield canola or fall rye or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
But the fields that it is fit for, it's working. And another thing, that this is the one that I've seen the most heads turn at my meetings, is we all have those 2 acre, 5 acre areas in our fields that just don't produce.
Mm-hmm.
I started looking at my yield maps and said, can we turn these into a profit map?
Mm-hmm.
Where an area that's red loses money and an area that's orange breaks even and an area that's yellow is minimal profit.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started looking at the field that way, I found any area that was consistently red or orange over 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
I took it out of production. It went into year 1. I depended on the soil. If it's sandy, I've got a different blend. But if it's saline, I've got 2 different blends I mixed together that have what I'd spoke about before, the tillage radish and the sunflowers and the saltlander grass. And then I had put in some other grasses and alfalfa. And I just let it grow year 1 and let it rot. Year 2, we'll cut it for hay. Year 3, maybe we'll cut it for hay. We may let it just rot again, let the organic matter come back up. But what I'm seeing is a drastic increase in the profitability of the acres I'm grain farming. And then the years that I do cut the hay, I mean, hay's worth $80 to $125 a bale now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all new. Hey, we're seeing 2, 3, 3.5 bales an acre. My oldest stuff, which is year 5 now, still this year was just under 2 bales an acre. And that was after we didn't cut some areas last year.
Wow. That's impressive.
Hmm.
That is such an interesting way to look at your fields. I've never heard anybody talk about that before. That is so smart. Wow.
We've taken out almost 400 acres on a 6,000 acre farm out of production and put it back into hay.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about looking at their farm that way, and yet it makes so much sense as soon as you say it. That is just brilliant, because if it's not making money for you anyway, then why would you keep throwing inputs at it?
And if you don't want to cut hay, we're lucky enough we've got people here that can help us, my dad and myself. My dad works overseas in Europe on the rigs still in the oil field, and I'm doing the MLA thing. We've got a great group that can get the hay cut and baled and load trucks and sell it. If you don't want to do that, and it's only a 2-3 acre piece per field, you're just increasing your profitability in the rest of the field, and you're inviting the beneficial bugs in then, because you can just seed a perennial pollinator blend then,
Mm-hmm.
which starts fixing the soil, helps the organic matter, does the living root,
Mm-hmm.
but it's inviting in those beneficial pollinators and bugs again.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see a direct benefit for, I would say, the first few thousand feet of the field.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to flea beetles in the spring.
Yeah.
And you're going to almost see a full field benefit when it comes to flowering plants like your peas, your flax, your canola, your mustard.
Wow. Just because of inviting back the insects.
Yeah.
The pollinators,
And
say.
the pollinators, I mean, it in simple science, when you have bees show up when canola's flowering, there's a positive correlation there.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And our mail lady, every year they have bees, and I traded her a few bags of this perennial pollinator mix this year for some honey. Mm-hmm. And just the other week, I was gone to a conference, and my wife was texting me pictures of our different blends we have in the seed shed. And she says, the mail lady wants another bag. Which is the right one? She sent me a picture of a flower. She's like, she wants it with this fuzzy purple thing. I'm like, oh, she's looking for sandfoin. Oh, she's like, yeah, they planted it around their garden, and they said it is just wild how much the bees love it. I'm like, oh yeah, it's this bag. You send it to her, and if they want to give us honey or anything, whatever, it don't matter. If they're liking it, get them another bag. It'll be great.
Get them another bag. Does it ever
Yeah.
amaze you the difference that it makes, even just doing some small changes and the impact that it can have? Does it still surprise you sometimes?
Yes and no. I mean, I probably left out a big part of where the first initial surprises were.
Mm-hmm.
My friend who was into carbon and the earth smart stuff, we started these practices in my garden a couple years before.
Oh yeah.
I started the cover crops in my garden. I started this fall rye idea in my garden. And that's where I actually have more people coming to me about that than I do large scale ag. Like, how can you fix my garden like you did yours?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so, yeah, those surprises are, I mean, when you get a phone call from someone, like we had some neighbors the one year, I had 10 acres directly across my driveway, and they seen these sunflowers, and I had some people say, you know what, Chris, or everyone calls me Critter. You know what, Critter, I thought you were crazy all summer. I had no idea what those were, and you didn't cut it, and you just left it. Because I noticed your driveway never blew in this winter. And I was like, wow, maybe I should do that. And then we'll wait till the spring. And they're like, why? And then they seen that 10 acres got almost 50 bales of hay. And I was like, what did that used to have for a crop? And they're like, well, it was like, exactly.
Exactly.
So now we've had a year of no production. That means we've had a year of not losing money. We've got $400 to $500 an acre worth of hay. Now, not every acre is like that. I would say the average is to a bale and a half
Mm-hmm.
to 2.5 bales an acre.
Yeah.
But that's still around $200 an acre, and you're somewhere at about $60 to $100 an acre profit.
Wow.
On land that consistently for 3 years broke even or lost money.
Yeah. Yeah. That is such a smart way to treat that land. I am just in love with that idea. I can't wait for more people to hear about that, because what a great way to approach, even if for farmers who haven't tried this before and are just curious, and well, why don't you just start with a land that you're losing money on anyway?
Mm-hmm. That to me, that's where I point guys to now. Like, don't look at full field first. Let's start looking at your soil. Let's find a blend that is going to work for that little bit, and don't jump the gun. I did that, and it was to my financial detriment at some points where I tried to do 1,000 acres of Italian ryegrass on the second year I worked with Italian ryegrass, and whoops, we didn't get the spring rain. I'm like, well, that didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you can, with these blends, you can seed them with any drill. I've seeded them with Paralink Bordeaux. I've seeded them with a Vaterstad. I've seeded them with a disc drill now.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a happy medium between the big seeds like the sunflowers and the small hay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you get these in the ground, they make a difference.
Yeah. How important is it, the equipment that farmers use? You said you have a disc drill now. That makes a pretty big difference, switching from a hoe drill, because that is tilling the land, not necessarily turning it, but pretty close.
Yeah, the disc drill, I'm not going to say a disc drill is going to solve all your problems, because it's not.
Mm-hmm.
They're all tools in this. I still, for cash cropping, some of my worst crops this year are my disc drill seeded stuff, but also some of my best crops are.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on trash management. Field over field is different. You get a colder start with a disc drill. So there are and I like to look at this through the lens of reality.
Mm.
Like, I find too often you can read a couple books and listen to some podcasts, and the horror stories aren't brought up.
Mm-hmm.
And there always is that. I mean, I could tell you about issues I had with an air tank this year on my Seed Hawk. Well, when we look at the full picture, the disc drill is an amazing tool when you want to retain more moisture, when you do not want to disturb soil. If you really want to get more intensive and you want to start seeding, like we have Alsite clover that we're combining last year. We had red clover we combined. I said we combined fescue and perennial ryegrass this year. If you want those to be more even and you want them to have their best chance, the disc drill's the way for it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, also, heck, I've Valmar'd some Alsite down. I seeded canola with the Seed Hawk over it.
Mm-hmm.
It turned out great. A little bit more, you're hoping Mother Nature deals the right cards for you.
Right. That's always a factor.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's benefits to all these tools. And
Mm-hmm.
you can notice a difference depending on your drill. You go from an inch opener to a half-inch opener. It's a lot less soil disturbance.
Yeah.
And I think it's up for every farm to see what does that do and what does that mean for your farm. Because what I'm doing may not be the answer for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm finding is so beneficial with the regenerative principles as opposed to, say, like comparing it to organic farming. Organic farming is very strict. It's actually a lot of tillage, which is not good. And it just doesn't give you as many tools to use. Whereas regenerative farming is like, hey, here's the basic principles, here's the ideas of how you should be thinking about your soil to grow your crops in. And go play with them and see what works for you. There's no one right way to do it. There's so many ways to make it fit for each farm.
Yeah, and you can adopt tons of practices, or you can say, you know what, I want to take care of some kochia issues and have a living root. And you can do that very easily. You don't have to get into growing grasses and clovers and changing the herbicides you use. If you want to just have something simple, that's very easy. You add that, like adding fall rye to your cereals. Even if you don't have a grain cart or anything to mix it, to blend it, you can just put fall rye in one tank and your wheat or your barley or your oats in another tank, and you don't have to adjust your herbicide plan at all.
Mm-hmm. And just see what the results are, put it in,
Yeah.
and just test your soil and see what happens.
Yep. I mean, for myself, one thing we were doing, and the reason why I wanted to change how I was utilizing fall rye was I was using it to control kochia before I was using it as a cover crop. I would go and seed it in the fall in the areas that were bad,
Mm-hmm.
that already had lots of kochia. But it was almost, yes, it helped in the spring because you had a lot heavier stand. But that really heavy stand, the allelopathic zone, lasted a lot longer, which was a detriment in the spring then.
Mm. Right.
But having that fall rye grow year round with my wheat or my barley or my oats, it helped control kochia year round and was easier. Terminated it early in May.
Mm-hmm.
By the time we were ready to seed canola, that allelopathic zone, it's about a 10-day, 2-week thing before it's gone. I'd seed my canola and I wouldn't lose any canola plants into that.
Farming is a stressful living, to say the least.
Yep.
Why do you think cover crops are so important? Do you see it as just a financial benefit, or is there something more overall in the bigger picture?
No, I see this as the long game. Like I found, well, I'll get a little deep here. So even socially and culturally, we're looking for everything right now because it is available now, and that is to our detriment, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We've lost the ability to, not everyone, but a lot of folks, we've lost the ability to look at the long game. How is this going to benefit 5, 10, 25, 100 years from now?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not a, I'm not looking at the long game on this, like saying this will heal the planet or this will heal the environment. I'm not looking at things that way. But I know that healthier soil is going to retain more water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for every 3% of organic matter you go up, I believe it's 4% more water that it can retain. It is simple math and food sustainability. So economics and food sustainability says, if I raise my soil organic matter and I've got a living root, I give myself a better chance at having a good crop in the future.
Yes.
And so we can go deeper than that, and we can take it as far as we want on how that can benefit, but I don't think you have to. I think if you just look at it through that lens, to be like, what, I'm just creating a way that if my kids want to farm, or the young fellas that are working with me now we've given the opportunity to farm, that they're going to be more sustainable. Wow, what a gift to leave them. There's a legacy I want to leave. I'm not a guy that's big on legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we all get to leave one, whether we mean to or not. And if you're intentional on what you want to leave behind, then that's just a better impact you get to make.
I mean, the old saying, always leave better than you found it. And to me, it's pretty, I see that happening.
And that's it for this week's episode of Regenerative Farming News. I'm so glad you joined me for this conversation about open farm days, innovative new no-till drills, and Chris Beaudry's inspiring journey with cover crops. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow the podcast and share it with your friends, family, and fellow farmers. Every share helps spread the word about regenerative agriculture. And if you want to continue the conversation, you can find me on Facebook, where I post updates, resources, and stories from the field. Until next time, keep building healthy soil, growing healthy food, and strengthening our farming communities. I'm Heather Heinrichs. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.